Welcome, everyone. This is the Creating Standards panels. Joining me is Matthias Bankert, who's research liaison at Input Output, also CIP author and CIP editor. Adam Dean, who's full stack engineer, also SPO Buffy, and has been working strongly on the royalty CIP currently in pull request form. Robert Fair as CIP community editor and SPO, COSD. Alessandro Conrad, Spacebuds creator, CIP author, NFT standards, and SPO Berry. As to myself, I am technical project manager at the Cardano Foundation and CIP editor along with Matthias, Sebastian, Duncan. This specific panel is structured in a very open way. This is the opening up towards standards. So the Cardano community functionally has a need to coordinate and collaborate on standards, but how we make those standards surface is a little bit opaque. A lot of times people want to push one way of doing things, but oftentimes somebody else wants to do something some other way. One of those aspects has actually recently come up. This is also part of the reason why we've enabled the CIP platform. So the Cardano Improvement Proposals is a platform that is managed by the Cardano Foundation that enables participation from the community, from IOHK, and has so far seen some of those standards surface. So I'd like to ask Alessandro regarding the emergence of the standards for NFT, so non-fungible token. When this CIP came along, why did it actually come along? So you started writing the CIP, but I know that there was initially some struggle regarding coordination. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So the general idea of this NFT standard is like to make it easy for third parties and wallets to integrate it and like make everything seamless and easy. But like initially there were different ideas or specifically a lot of people were struggling how we could like create for these native tokens even a standard. Many were looking, or myself were looking at the standard over at Ethereum, the ERC-721 token, for example. And I thought like, okay, we need something similar on Cardano because this works pretty great on Ethereum, and we need something similar on Cardano. So I was talking to other guys, for example, also Adam, and yeah, we were trying to like find some standard, but all had like different implementations initially. But I felt very confident about. So my approach was to like take the multi-asset ledger advantage into the metadata, because every other standard was not really making use of it. Like with my standard, I was able to mint multiple tokens in a single transaction with different policies, token names, and all of this. And for the third party, it was seamless. So you could just do the process, the same process if it was just one token or multiple token in the transaction. It didn't matter. So this was like why I was pushing for this standard, because yeah, I felt like this was very important and it made stuff very easy. So I was basically proposing this idea on the Cardano Forum, and yeah, I got a lot of feedback, good feedback, and but still others thought like their standard is better than mine, or like they didn't see like the idea behind my standard. So then I was basically yeah, launching Spacebuds and have integrated this standard into the Spacebuds NFTs. And afterwards it got way more attention. And then people started realizing the potential and the idea behind it. And yeah, then I started basically to propose this my idea as a real CIP, and then we got more feedback, and this was slowly basically how this evolved as a standard. And for example, Adam then also contributed or asked questions.
Adam, how was your interaction with the entire effort from the other side of the spectrum?
Yeah, so the other side, I guess that you could say, was probably more closely aligned. We used 721 because we were kind of referencing ERC or EIP 721, I think it is, for that standard that we had adopted in CIP 25. But we had this kind of like other standard that was kind of closer to an 1155 token, where you can mint a whole bunch of tokens and have kind of a commonality between them. And we were, kind of everybody in those early days, right after Space Buds and right around that time, was going, well, let's try this. Let's put this in. It's JSON. I can just add any keys or whatever I want anywhere. And what that created was a huge problem for explorers to try to filter out what's going on here. Some people are using 0 for an index. Some people are using 1. Some are 721. And so, I became a convert. A lot of my early tokens used that other standard. But in talking to Alessandro and a lot of the other guys in the community, I realized how streamlined and minimal it is, but truly flexible and powerful at the same time. And so then, rather than fight against the current, I was like, okay, let's get on board, but then make sure that it accepts and is accommodating to all these different kind of tokens that we might want to make. It's like SpaceBuds had a image. What if I want an image and a PDF, like for Space Coins now, which we have, and we got there by collaborating and working together to create that standard, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that the entire evolution of those standards is something that we've not seen yet coming from everywhere, but the emergence of it on shared efforts, in this case, the NFT standards, is really something that comes up. But I wanted to open it up to either Matthias or Robert. Do either of you want to step up to explaining why you feel we might need standards, and maybe both of you, Robert from the community side and Matthias from maybe more the IO side, the technical side. Let's go with Matthias first.
Yeah, so as Alessandro already touched upon a bit, we need standards mainly because people do things differently, right? So for a same problem, you would have as many solutions as you have people, at least. And generally speaking, that doesn't work for people that are trying to consume that information, right? So if you have two different ways of creating NFTs, and you have only one platform to show them, which one should they pick, right? So you could argue they should pick both ways, but then, as you add more ways, more applications, that just doesn't work. So you need to come up with standards so that people can agree on one way to do things, or at least a few ways that are suitable for a particular set of problems. And then from there, you can build a whole ecosystem around the standard, right? Once everyone agree on how things should be done and what's the recipe for tackling a particular problem, then it's easier to create applications that will either produce or consume some information according to that standard.
Robert, do you feel that there's a different perspective from the community side, or is this a different mindset when you think about standards and emerging those?
I tell you, the first time I thought about standards when I looked at the CIP process, and there were a couple of things that I wished were done differently in the wallets and then the interaction between stake pools when I was starting out in the very beginning as an operator. And I had the idealistic belief that this is not the way I feel today, that as standards, there are a way to kind of pressurize the providers of the software, like IO and Emergo, to do what the community might want to do by some type of some peer pressure or some compelling idea that they couldn't ignore, or an idea that was 2 or 3 years old that you could point a finger at, like links to stake pools, for instance. And I came to realize that that's not really what it's all about. And in fact, the having the standards the way Matthias and you have outlined them before is really what the community needs for its longevity. But it still has been important. The standards have still been important from the community and from other organizations that aren't in that organizational scheme to give them a voice. So basically, standards give us a voice, and they give us an idea to flesh out our idea in a way that lots of people can consider them, which is more important than establishing any accountability, as it turned out to be. So to put it simply, I would say that standards give us a voice. They give a voice to the community, and they give a voice to our ideas, rather than creating obligations.
Yeah, I was about to say it's also, conversely, a way to actually push out information from the inside as well. Right? One of the reasons I have been writing CIPs sometimes is because I get asked multiple times the same thing from different people. Like, hey, how is this done in the wallet? Or how are we supposed to do that? And, one time is okay, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. At some point you start thinking, okay, I should definitely write that down and make it a standard so that people can really start relying on that and basically stop asking me, right? And sometimes we also have things we do as part of the wallet or as part of any application, and we think, oh, that is something quite interesting, quite intricate, and that's something we probably want people to know how it's done, so that they can either redo it or review it or contribute to it maybe, and push some improvements. And then we just we write a CIP for that. We push it in the hands of the community as well, saying, okay, guys, that's how it's done. What do you think? And then, people can also argue, can say, oh, I don't like that because, as an SPO, I have this and these problems that, this particular way of things doesn't really cover. And that really helps, getting everyone's perspective into the equation.
Thanks. I dropped a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if either of you, I don't know, Alessandro, want to jump in, but I feel that there's also that transition from the technical, we're trying to push something on the platform, to the it's actually accepted as a standard. So the NFT metadata standard might be one such example. There was some conversation, some back and forth. It's not really what we wanted, or it is, and there's that jump. How do you feel about that transition? Like, at what point does something become a standard?
Well, so I could probably speak to that a little bit, but it becomes a standard when I would probably say the majority of people start using it. And so it doesn't mean that it's fixed in stone, because I think everybody probably on this call at some point has suffered from developer blindness, where we put the button somewhere and we go, what do you mean you can't click the button? It's right there, because we know exactly how the thing works, right? Whether that's a wallet or a stake pool or an NFT dropper or whatever it is we're doing. So by publishing these standards and having that conversation, we realize the shortcomings of our own vision sometimes by getting that outside interaction and discussion going. And so I think that's why standards are so important to be out there and publicly kind of documented and discussed.
Yeah, right. So I agree on that. And I would also say, like, just by creating a standard as a CIP doesn't mean it's actually a standard. It really needs to be used by someone, and then, yeah, especially by the majority, then it really becomes like a standard. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
That there may also be about standards that cannot be that can't be used actually until they're implemented by another entity, like IOHK, for instance, like the links to the stake pools that I mentioned. There's a possibility that things may be suggested as standards by initiative, because there's something actually has to bridge the gap between the proposing of a certain way of doing things and the party who will be implementing them, realizing that there is actually popular demand. So again, in this case, the SPOs as developers actually can't contrive a way of pointing links into their stake pools. It actually has to be done in a wallet. So there's still the pending idea that maybe marking some of these of these suggestions in the Cardano community, like the CIPs, can be labeled as initiatives either on the basis of a popular consensus or strong interaction, for instance, between the SPOs and the marketing people or some other group within IOG or one of the Cardano implementing companies. So there's the idea of initiative might also bridge that gap.
Okay, so what are some examples of challenges that you can think of regarding the establishment of standards? So besides the choosing a platform and maybe the communicating. Matthias, maybe.
Well, I would say the main challenge is getting people to agree, right? Especially when people have a very strong belief on some direction or another. It's often hard to come up with compromises, and that's often what lead the way to two different standards, right? So getting to an agreement on what's actually the problem first and how to solve it is usually tough discussion. For some standards, it's pretty straightforward because either there is not much, there is not many solutions, and the only one exposed is very satisfactory for everyone. But sometimes, when it's things like NFT standard, for instance, I want to have this thing in that way, or I want to name things in that way, or but I want to be able to embed this and this information, and then people will start disagreeing on the objectives, and it's harder then to get to the point where the discussion just move forward.
Is that inherently bad? Is it bad to have competing standards or people disagreeing in the community?
No, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's challenging, right? And it's a good thing. We want the standards to be discussed, right? If you just have a standard that doesn't bring any discussion, that makes complete unanimity, you could argue that you didn't need the standard in the first place, right? If everyone agrees and everyone would just have done things in this exact same way, then why did you have a standard in the first place?
Okay. So regarding the emergence of the standards in those conversations, we've seen that there's some tools that facilitate that process, such as the CIP, the platforms such as the forums and all of that. There's been some emergence and discussions regarding those processes. How do you feel, for example, about Cardano governance and to some extent how it enables or, do you feel that Cardano governance and the CIP process is properly structured to come up with those standards? Adam, do you feel that we're going about it the right way, or?
I think we've got a decent start. It's kind of a common refrain that right now we still kind of have the training wheels on, and we're kind of slowly learning how to ride the bike without them. So for right now, it's not the worst, but I see challenges, like Alessandro said, in finding the right platform to discuss. Is GitHub the best place to host those conversations, or on the Cardano forums? Or should we be taking it to crypto Twitter polls? Like, what's the right way? There's a lot of options. But right now, yes, we have this kind of overarching centralization by the big three that I would really like to see go away and somehow become more of a community-based initiative for at least not necessarily the establishment of standards that affect the core blockchain level, but kind of all these things that we're building on top of it. I don't think that we need oversight from IOG or CF. I've certainly never asked for it. I don't think Alessandro did when he created CIP 25. We just kind of went out there and did it, and then we explained our decisions and why we made those choices, and kind of better to beg forgiveness than to ask for permission. And that's always kind of been my way of going about things.
I hear you. So one of the effort that we're trying to do with the CIP platform is to make it so that it's not something that is actually imposed onto people, but it's really something that people come up with, and we just foster the conversation or formalize it. I wonder if the message is properly going across in that way. I think a lot of people get exposed to the doing things one way, but maybe there's a better way to communicate this. I don't know. Anybody want to step up regarding that perspective?
Sorry, yeah, I did a little bit more on that topic though. Like, so right now we have a lot of CIPs. I mean, CIP 25 was in pending status for over a month, I think it was, while we were discussing it and going back and forth. There was, meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of tokens being created with various different kind of like implementations along the way. We've seen other CIPs come in, like the messaging standard, the CIP I think it's 22 to send messages with transactions that have kind of gone a lot quicker. But there is that sense that until it's accepted by the powers that be, which right now are IOG and CF, it's still not official. It's not actually a standard. It's just the thing that you're working on. So until we can kind of get rid of that, yeah, it's nice to see CF and IOG as kind of the community discussion facilitators, but they still ultimately have that kind of ability to bless or shut down a CIP that is not really as decentralized as I would like to see it.
I also think that many people are not even aware of CIPs in general. So when I put out the NFT metadata standard, and if I would have just put it on the CIP repository, probably no one would be aware of it. But I actually pushed it on Telegram, Twitter, Discord, and Reddit, and so people got aware of it. But I think if I would just go like the official route, I would say probably not many would have even known about it. So I think we need some kind of like common platform. Everyone can get used to it.
I definitely felt the same thing that Alessandro was feeling, because I wrote the CIP and that I was talking about before, and then I was wondering why I just sat there and did nothing. And then it actually took, thankfully, with some help from Frederick at the Cardano Foundation, there was after a few months, we managed to get IOG marketing involved in that in the links to the stake pools proposal, which was obviously, it was of interest to a lot of SPOs. Then only really more than a handful of them knew about it. There were thousands that have come in at this point, and there were really only maybe 7 or 8 of them that were cheering it on because they found a way of paying attention on Twitter or some other way, some direct messages or whatever. But it really was just pushing, able to circulate with a small number of people. And I think this applies to a lot of the developer proposals as well, because people may be developing without knowing about the CIPs, just like they're starting stake pools without knowing about some of the standards that either affect them currently or could affect them someday, or that they would be interested in having. So maybe taking some of the CIPs and maybe some other presentations of standards, and then putting them into like a chapter in the Plutus Pioneer program, putting them in the documentation that's given to the stake pool owners, so they can actually be aware of this body of pending standards from day one, and they can start implementing them in their own business and development and operational planning.
Yeah, so I agree. I think there's a disconnect, but I'm also hearing that there's on one side we want standards to be established and agreed on by IOHK or CF or whichever organizing body decides on things, and on the other we want to have decentralization. The thing is, we're not going to get one or the other. We're going to get like that cross in between, and we get to leverage those platforms, I feel, as best we can. The CIP, we want to get the community involved, but oftentimes people don't particularly want to get involved. And at the same time, it's very hard when you're in a position of full control to relinquish and enable that conversation for a greater community. It's very frustrating from my side, from the foundation. We're really working to enable the community opening up, and but at the same time, you can hear it in your discourse when someone says we want IO to implement it or agree. And I think we're getting there. I think it's just a tedious route, and I think that Catalyst is working towards bettering that road. It is not where I want it to be, and I'm hoping that it moves more towards the decentralized aspect, but there's always the difficult jump of letting go of things that we think are easy when they're controlled versus hard when they're decentralized. Anybody want to speak a little bit about this?
Yeah, actually, I think we have some really good examples, prime examples that have come up recently. we had Alessandro create this metadata standard, mostly by himself, but with feedback from the community. Um, but we didn't see the wallets go anywhere, right? Daedalus and Yoroi still only have rudimentary support for NFTs and the standard that's now an accepted CIP. So what did we do? The community went out and built wallets that can show NFTs and have NFT collectors show off their collection. Both Nami by Alessandro as well, and then there's CC Wallet, and there's a bunch of others that are all in the pipeline and they're coming down. And so really, you say there's this sense of not wanting to relinquish control, but again, the community is not going to sit there and wait for IOG to give it up. We're just going to take it and do it, and we're going to do it ourselves. So in some ways, that kind of stubbornness and refusal to relinquish control is driving more ingenuity, I think, in the community. Because if you're not going to do it for us, then I'm going to go build my own better mousetrap, essentially, which is brilliant, and I love it, to just see it all happening and going that way. And I think, there's definitely some standards, like Robert's been touching on, to have a link that goes directly to my stake pool. Well, we see that kind of now with NAMI integration and Pool PM and some other things where you can go to a website and click a button and the wallet delegates to your pool. But again, we didn't get that from the kind of the core group. And so we have the power and we can use it. So I don't know. We don't need that blessing from on high, I guess, to make things happen. But there are some things. We see other CIPs around protocol parameters and things like that, where ultimately, for right now at least, it's going to come down to whether or not IOG or Emergo or some of these other people implement it at a blockchain level.
I totally agree with what you just said, Adam. And at the same time, I don't think there is, in the case of the CIP at least, it's not so much about the blessing of the big three, than it is about getting some technical overview on this, the solutions that are being proposed, right? The role of the editors is really not to like block a CIP or to prevent people from submitting standards. The role is really just to make sure that the solutions being proposed are sane and technically sound, right? So I would say, for lack of a better person, at this stage we have created a panel of editors from the various entities at the foundation, Emergo at the time, now this is Spark, and IOG, with the end goal in the end to also open that up to the community and to technical members of the community. The thing is that to review CIPs, you need to have quite an extensive knowledge of the Cardano ecosystem, right? Because CIP can be basically about anything, which sort of rules out many people that are really focused on one particular area or one particular topic, and that don't necessarily want actually to have that broad knowledge. But there are actually a few people from the community I could think of, that would make definitely good CIP editors, and I would definitely welcome them inside this group. And again, not to give their blessing, but simply to be able to provide technical feedback on, the feasibility on the solution. And I can think of, for instance, a recent CIP from Andrew, which was about like authenticating stake pools to websites, right? Third-party website, like, I don't know, Adaptools or Cardano Scan, whatever. And there were a few cryptography round trips involved in that CIP. And the question was, okay, is it secure? Does it have some problems? And how could we maybe improve that? Is it as efficient as it could be? And it was actually good to have that conversation and to be able to have that conversation. And so that requires the editors to have at least some level of expertise on many of those topics. So yeah, it's more about finding the right people that can do this than having a blessing from the big three in the end.
Yeah, the kind of the training wheels, right? And so right now, who's the most knowledgeable is the big three, but we're going to get there and have those community members eventually that can kind of step up and help, so we have less of that feeling, I guess, which is right now it kind of feels like we're being nannied, but maybe in the future it's just we're being reviewed by our own peers and kind of shift that perspective a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm really amazed when I see, people building wallets, for instance. Because I'm really seeing then these whole bits of knowledge being offloaded to a whole bunch of community members. And, that sharing this part of knowledge means that there are more and more people that can get into the conversation, more and more people that can contribute to solutions. And it also challenges us internally, right? Because now we can say, oh, look, the NAMI guys, they did it that way, and it's actually much better. So what do we do, right? And yeah, that's good to have this knowledge sharing happening, and that's something that will happen over time, right? More and more people in the community are getting knowledgeable. Now we have like a stack exchange also for people to get more organized in the questions and answers, and you can already see that most of the answers are given by community members, not by the big three, and that's a good thing, right? That means there are people in the community not working for IOG, not working for DC Spark or Emergo, that can answer deeply technical questions on Cardano.
Yeah, so I think we're getting close to our time, but I want to open up to one final question: is what future standards do you guys see as arising for Cardano that might be needed, and how might someone get involved with helping to emerge those standards? And I think that we can do a roundtable snapshot just to get everyone's perspective on things. And unless there's a final take on standards that you want to open up from a different aspect. With that said, I'm going to pass it on to Alessandro. So what is a standard that you think might be needed, and how might someone get involved in your opinion?
So what standard I'm currently involved in, and I think this is a very important one, is the dApp connector, like the bridge between the wallet and the browser. I think this is a very important one because this opens up brings the masses into the ecosystem. And yeah, I think this is a very important standard we need to improve and build on.
And how would you suggest someone get involved with the standards? Is it a matter of digging in the forums, looking at the CIPs, specifically working on wallets?
Yeah, I would say the Cardano Forum was definitely also the place where I started looking for standards and CIPs. Basically, you can find a lot of stuff on any of the social media platforms, like also Reddit. You find also very valuable information. Yeah, but basically Cardano Forum is the best place to start with.
Okay. Adam, do you have any standards that you're currently working on? Do you have any advice for people wanting to get involved?
Yeah, so I've never actually used the forums very heavily, but I'm in GitHub all the time. And so normally I'm kind of monitoring on the GitHub side, just kind of watching that CIP registry and getting all the emails about updates when there's comments or new pull requests and things like that. And I go and look and try to give feedback where I can. So I guess I would say, choose the platform that's most comfortable to you, but then go and try to make your voice heard. If something is important to you, provide your feedback. A lot of us aren't even necessarily experts in the field when we start. We just have an idea and we want to see where it leads. Specifically, like with the royalty standard for NFTs and not just art NFTs, but all tokens and how marketplaces might interact is one of the CIPs I've been trying to help with, so that we develop a standard, because we see all these new marketplaces for tokens emerging. And there's going to be all these DEXs and exchanges coming very soon. So if we can get out ahead of that royalty game and develop a standard before 5 different people create their own implementation, and we have this nightmare spaghetti bowl of a solution, then all the better. But yeah, I mean, just get out there and be involved and participate in the platform of your choice would be my best recommendation.
Well, I think the ones that are going to be most important, I agree with Alessandro and Adam about the NFTs and the web integration really being the most important things, and it's really good to see such vigorous standards already coming along for those. I remember on the Cardano Forum for a year or two ago, there was a lot of discussion about these things there, and then it just kind of petered off around the time around this time last year was when that participation started to trickle off. But I think that it really is the ideal place on the forum cardano.org for to actually take pending ideas for the people that aren't really may not really know GitHub. There may be collections of people. There may be small business owners that are that are thinking of hiring developers that might need a standard to cover their own work in some of these areas that really would need help fleshing out an idea. Without really exposing it to the chaotic community of Reddit or not really having an audience on Twitter or whatever. The Cardano Forum is just such a specialized area where it would be like an incubator for some of these standards. And I remember that was there when I joined Cardano about a year and a half ago. I see some evidence of discussions of all these things, including NFTs and some other integration issues before I got there 2 years ago. And I believe we could have that again if the Cardano Forum could be held up as maybe not the ideal place for some of these things, but definitely a safe place to talk about pending standards, especially with the people in the community that might initially be shy about presenting them to more official or more developer-oriented place. There just needs to be a safe place for these ideas to grow. So I'd vote for the Cardano Forum for that.
Thanks, Robert. Matthias, do you foresee any need for specific standards going forward for Cardano to coordinate? And what is your advice for people to get involved with the making of those standards?
Well, we are now in the Alonso era, right? So that means we have extended the Cardano ecosystem with quite many new features. And that means we're going to need a whole hell of new standards to make people, be able to cooperate on that. And that means mainly, ways of creating smart contracts in a specific ways, so that people can have a reliable way to do that. Right. The very first cornerstone of that is, as Sandro said, is this dApp connector, which is very much like MetaMask for Cardano in a way, and that's like the base interface for lightweight dApp to interact with a wallet in browser and whatnot. But now we also need new ways to get dApp to agree on how they do things. And things is here very, very broad. That's gonna be I don't know, anything really in the decentralized finance space. On how to interact with that, I have to say I kind of like the current approach. Maybe I'm also biased a bit because I'm always on GitHub. So GitHub is a very, very handy tool for me. And I think it's very easy to bring anything from GitHub to any other platform, right? If you want to share that on Twitter, you just put a link there. And that's what happened in the past. People just, click on the link and they can, see it already, right? You don't need to register on GitHub to see anything. You need to if you want to comment or to contribute, but at least you can have access to things and read the content. Or you can put a link on the forum and people can either enter on the forum or just jump on the GitHub as well. And to me, that's just, that's how it started a year and a half ago, I think now. And it's good. I would just continue that way. The GitHub is getting more and more attention. People know the place now. I see it being linked more and more often, even on Reddit sometimes. People comment something and say, yeah, just look at this CIP. It explains everything. And that's exactly, the vision I had initially when we started this CIP movement. I was really looking forward to that point where people would just be sharing CIP links to, as answer to technical problems, because that's much faster than trying to re-explain things in different ways to different people. So, yeah, just continue the way it is and keep on sharing, keep on bringing attention to that. And maybe, as I think Adam mentioned earlier, try to put more, more excerpts of the CIP here and there in the docs, and refers to it also from the official documentations more often in more places. Like, hey, if you have, you want to solve this and this particular problem, have a look at the CIPs there, right? To try to get more and more people to know that they exist at least, so that it becomes a reference for, newcomers.
Thanks, Matthias. With that said, I want to thank every one of you for attending this panel. I think it's been pretty informative going and digging into the standards, the emergence, and how they come up and how we can continue them. Two sentences that I noted from the conversation earlier I want to bring up is, first one is agreeing is hard. People are going to have differences of opinion all the time, and I think that it's good to have differences of opinion. I think those conversations are healthy. And the other one is standards give us a voice. I think we can all agree that it's good to have things that we all align on, or that even like a majority of us align on. It's good to have differences, but it's also good sometimes to align. Thank you very much for making this panel. I wish you a good rest of your day and looking forward to the future for Cardano. Thank you.